My name is Dr. Rochelle Almeida and I'm delighted to be here in Bengaluru at this festival. I am a professor of the humanities at New York University, where I have been teaching for the last 27 years. I teach global cultures, which is South Asian studies, but I've also taught writing. And I've had the good fortune of teaching writing in different parts of the world, the US, the UK, India, and most recently when I was on a Fulbright fellowship, I taught at the University of Alisher Navoy, which is in Tashkent in Uzbekistan. I'm also a freelance writer. I have written extensively and I do both things. I do writing, both creative writing as well as all sorts of journalistic writing, and I teach. I am delighted to be at this festival and to be able to talk a little bit about my work, both as a writer and as a professor of writing. And of course there are differences in terms of the work that you do in those two different capacities. As a professor, you have a lot of reading to do because you're reading a lot of your students' writing, and then you have to find a way to respond to it that is encouraging and that is not demoralizing, because you do want your students to feel encouraged. As a writer, you spend a lot of time thinking about what shape your piece, your ultimate piece is going to take. So that really it calls for two different types of skills, being a professor and being a writer. And yet at the same time, the two are amalgamated, because it's only after you have done a lot of writing yourself that you can start teaching it. And once you start teaching it, you get more and more adept at it, and you feel that you're doing a better job. But in both cases, whether it is as a writer or as a teacher, that is as a professor, the more experience you have and the more practice you have doing it, the better it turns out. So I would say that I am very blessed. I've been very fortunate to spend my life doing two things that I love the most: writing and teaching. And at the end of my career now, I feel really very, very happy at what I was able to do during my long career in both capacities.
I registered to begin doctoral research towards a PhD degree. One of my biggest scoops at this time was meeting the British rock star Mick Jagger, if you can believe it, in the midst of the Thar desert in Jaisalmer, and surreptitiously asking him questions that would count as a celebrity interview today without disclosing my identity as a freelance writer. Needless to say, 3 editors entered a bidding war to grab my offering. I am the proud owner of a picture with the musician who gave the world "I Can't Get No Satisfaction." I thought on my feet and outside the frame, so that the resultant interview feature, when it was published, was the talk of the newspaper office, if not the Bombay music world. In like manner, I know that Salman Rushdie is most fond of mentioning his prizes, because I had the chance to interview him on stage, no less, at Fairfield University in Fairfield, Connecticut, when he was invited as a guest speaker. In the midst of the academic ivory tower, among writers who know well the perils of publish or perish, I was recognized as that oddball professor journalist on campus, and was given the incredible honor of interviewing the famous writer, whilst a 1,000-strong audience, much like this one, looked on. When people ask me today who the most famous person is that I have ever met, I am torn between responding Mick Jagger and Salman Rushdie. There is also former US Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger, whom I had a most curious conversation with in an elevator at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, where I served as a highlights tour guide for 22 years. But at that time, I was not thinking or writing outside the frame, so that does not count. Eventually, 33 years ago, a new chapter in my life took me to New York City, where I became a first-generation immigrant. I had been offered the opportunity to pursue a postdoctoral degree in English at St. John's University, and always having been a nerd, I took it on, but not without exploring a way to write.
Oh, thank you.
Like students, like us, like it's like
Well, all writing, and you all writing.
No, ma'am, we are actually doing MBA, but like after listening to your speech.
Is this better? Yeah. Maybe a little bit. Okay, thanks, Sally. So, what I'd like everybody to start with is to just, we already have introductions, but to tell us about your relationship to city writing. How do you define it? What does it mean to you? And Roland, we had a quick discussion if you could also talk about filmic cities, or if you like instead.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for choosing this panel. And to Sally and to the Asia Pacific Writers and Translators Conference for bringing us all together after 3 years. My thinking about the city writing is that the city becomes character. It becomes a vital character in the ways stories, journalism articles, or even film is rendered into the text. Then the characters, the bodies of the citizens itself form the composite of the narrative, also becomes the receptacle of the city. The disparity of rich and poor, being male, female, LGBTQIA, etc. These are all kind of tendered in the bodies of those who live the city. They are also symptoms of the problems of the city. Again, the disparity of rich and poor areas, the ways neoliberalism probably is exercised at the ground level, not just from the top policymakers' point of view, etc. And the conflicts. So necessarily, city writing are all conflicted stories, and because of the heaviness of the conflict, the burden of resolving the city writing isn't going to be a neat kind of closure. It's always going to be something of a heavy weight that probably likely the characters will just move on from whatever they might have chosen to be entangled with, the social issues that they might have been chosen to entangle with, or even very tragic kinds of closures of the city. But it's nothing that's a neat kind of writing where it's going to be depicted. It's always complex, very layered, very nuanced, because as we know, the city itself, like Bangalore, has very disparate kinds of concerns and issues, and the rendering of these concerns and issues fall unevenly on the various bodies that occupy this space in this kind of disproportionate realities that all people are in, and all people are not in this kind of same condition.